Good evening and welcome back to another episode of The Longing, where today we're going to be starting a new book. And interestingly, we've actually had a tie on which book to read, so I'm actually going to pick myself out of the two choices. So the draw was between the Iliad and Dream Days, and I'm actually going to go for Dream Days just because it's a little bit shorter. So we can get another vote sooner. So let's get going with Dream Days by Kenneth Grahame. In the matter of general culture and attainments, we youngsters stood on pretty level ground. True, it was always happening that one of us would be singled out at any moment, freakishly and without regard to his own preferences, to wrestle with the inflections of some idiotic language long rightly dead, while another, from some fancied artistic tendency, which always failed to justify itself, might be told off without warning to hammer out scales and exercises, and to bedew the senseless keys with tears of weariness or of revolt. But in subjects common to either sex, and held to be necessary even for him whose ambition soared no higher than to crack a whip in the circus ring, in geography, for instance, arithmetic, or the weary doings of kings and queens, each would have scorned to excel. And indeed, whatever our individual gifts, a general dogged determination to shirk and to evade kept us all at much the same dead level, a level of ignorance tempered by insubordination. Fortunately, there existed a wide range of subjects, a healthier tone than those already enumerated, in which we were free to choose for ourselves, and which we would have scorned to consider education. And in these we freely followed each his own particular line, often attaining an amount of special knowledge which struck our ignorant elders as simply uncanny. For Edward, the uniforms, accoutrements, colours, and mottos of the regiments composing the British Army had a special glamour. In the matter of facings he was simply faultless. Among chevrons, badges, medals, and stars he moved familiarly. He even knew the names of most of the colonels in command. And he would squander sunny hours prone on the lawn, heedless of challenge from bird or beast, poring over a tattered army list. My own accomplishment was of another character, took, as it seemed to me, a wider and more untrammelled range. Dragoons might have swaggered in Lincoln green, riflemen might have donned sporrans over tartan trews, without exciting notice or comment from me. But did you seek precise information as to the fauna of the American continent, then you had come to the right shop. Where and why the bison wallowed, how beaver were to be trapped and wild turkeys stalked, the grizzly and how to handle him, and the pretty pressing ways of the constrictor. In fine, the haunts and the habits of all that burrowed, strutted, roared, or wriggled between the Atlantic and the Pacific. All this knowledge I took for my province. By the others my equipment was fully recognized. Supposing a book with a bear hunt in it made its way into the house, and the atmosphere was electric with excitement, still, it was necessary that I should first decide whether the slot had been properly described and properly followed up, ere the work could be stamped with full approval. A writer might have won fame throughout the civilized globe for his trappers, and his realistic backwards, and all went for nothing. If his pemmican were not properly compounded, I damned his achievement, and it was heard of no more. Harold was hardly old enough to possess a special subject of his own. He had his instincts indeed, and at birds' nesting they almost amounted to prophecy. Where we others only suspected eggs, surmised possible eggs, hinted doubtfully at eggs in the neighbourhood, Harold went straight for the right bush, bough, or hole, as if he carried a divining rod. But this faculty belonged to the class of mere gifts, and was not to be ranked with Edward's law regarding facings, and mine as to the habits of prairie dogs, both gained by painful study and extensive travel in those realms of gold, the army list of Ballantyne. Selina's subject, quite unaccountably, happened to be naval history. There is no laying down rules as to subjects. You just possess them, or rather they possess you. and their genesis or protoplasm is rarely to be tracked down. Selina had never so much as seen the sea, but for that matter, neither had I ever set foot on the American continent, the byways of which I knew so intimately. And just as I, if set down without warning in the middle of the Rocky Mountains, would have been perfectly at home, so Selina, if a genie had dropped her suddenly on Portsmouth Hard, could have given points to most of its frequenters. From the days of Blake down to the death of Nelson, she never condescended further. Selina had taken spiritual part in every notable engagement of the British Navy, and even in the dark days when she had to pick up skirts and flee, chased by an ungallant De Ruyter or Van Tromp, she was yet cheerful in the consciousness that ere long she would be gleefully hammering the fleets of the world, in the glorious times to follow. When that golden period arrived, Selina was busy indeed, and while loving best to stand where the splinters were flying the thickest, she was also a careful and critical student of seamanship and of manoeuvre. She knew the order in which the great line of battleships moved into action, the vessels they respectively engaged, the moment when each let go its anchor and which of them had a spring on its cable. While not understanding the phrase, she carefully noted the fact, and she habitually went into an engagement on the quarter-deck of the gallant ship that reserved its fire the longest. At the time of Selina's weird seizure, I was unfortunately away from home, on a loathsome visit to an aunt, and my account is therefore feebly compounded from hearsay. It was an absence I never ceased to regret, scoring it up with a sense of injury against the aunt. There was a splendid uselessness about the whole performance, and that specially appealed to my artistic sense. That it should have been Selina, too, who should break out this way. Selina, who had just become a regular subscriber to the Young Ladies' Journal, and who allowed herself to be taken out to strange teas with an air of resignation, palpably assumed. This was a special joy, and served to remind me that much of this dreaded convention that was creeping over us might be, after all, only veneer. Edward was also absent, getting licked into shape at school, but to him the loss was nothing. With his stern practical bent, he wouldn't have seen any sense in it. To recall one of his favourite expressions, to Harold, however, for whom the gods had always cherished a special tenderness, it was granted not only to witness, but also priest-like, to feed the sacred fire itself, and if at the time he paid the penalty exacted by the sordid unimaginative ones who temporarily rule the roast, he must ever after, one feels sure, have carried inside him some of the white gladness of the acolyte who, greatly privileged, has been permitted to swing a censer at the sacring of the very Mass. October was mellowing fast, and with it the year itself, full of tender hints, in woodland and hedgerow, of a course well nigh completed. From all sides that still afternoon you caught the quick breathing and sob of the runner nearing the goal. Preoccupied and possessed, Selina had strayed down the garden and out into the pasture beyond, where, on a bit of rising ground that dominated the garden on one side and the downs with the old coach road on the other, she had cast herself down to chew the cud of fancy. There she was presently joined by Harold, breathless and very full of his latest grievance. I asked him not to, he burst out. I said if he'd only please wait a bit, and Edward would be back soon, and it couldn't matter to him, and the pig wouldn't mind, and Edward'd be pleased, and everybody'd be happy. But he just said he was very sorry, but bacon didn't wait for nobody. So I told him he was a regular beast, and then I came away. And I believe they're doing it now. And with that, we come to the end of the episode, I'm afraid. Sorry, I got a little bit stuck there in the middle, a couple of points for some reason, but oh well. So I'm going to say thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you all have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon or night, no matter what time of day it is. I hope you all have a wonderful one of it. And as always, we'll be back tomorrow for more of The Longing. Goodbye.